What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Thursday, it's time for another player breakdown video. This week, we're taking a look at Nick Chubb versus Tony Pollard versus Josh Jacobs. And if you have any comparison you want to see next week, put it in the comment section below, upvote the responses you agree with. So let's start off with Nick Chubb, entering his 6th season in the NFL, turning 28 late December. I have absolutely no concerns about his age. He is the oldest among this grouping, but no concerns. He's coming off his 6th straight season averaging 5 or more yards per carry, and he did so this last season with over 300 carries. First time he did that in his career. Jamal Charles is the only other running back to average 5 or more yards per carry in each of running back's first 5 seasons. And if you implement any sort of like minimum to those carries, then it's only Chubb, right? Because Jamal Charles had a 67 carry season and a 12 carry season thrown in there. So only Nick Chubb able to be this efficient in every single one of running back's first 5 years in their career. And honestly, like Chubb is inarguably a top 3 pure running back talent in the NFL right now, but there's a legitimate case to be made that he is the best running back in the NFL. He's also been extremely dependable throughout his career. He's missed a total of 7 games in 5 years, handling at least 200 touches in every single season. On top of that, he's been very consistent in the touchdown department. 10, 8, 12, 9, 13 touchdowns in each season of his career. That is very, very nice to see that he's going to be involved in that area. The only question we ever have with Nick Chubb is the ceiling. We know he's going to push for the league lead in rushing, but he also averages only 1.6 receptions per game, which is basically why, he can be potentially the best running back in football, but is never in consideration to be the top drafted running back in fantasy. This season will likely be his first without Kareem Hunt, though, and so while Jerome Ford is expected to take that role over, it's possible Chubb sees an increase in third down usage this season compared to what we've seen in prior seasons. And it's also worth noting that his target share has increased from 5.2% to 6.3%, up to 7.3% last season. So again, a spike in receptions, not like super likely to where he's going to come out here and have like 70 receptions, right? We know the ceiling that Chubb has in the receiving department. But if he's been getting, a little bit more usage in that area, the team is going to throw it a little bit more this season. You've got that chance that Hunt not being there, maybe Jerome Ford won't really approach what Hunt was doing. Like all of those working together say, okay, maybe he can have one of, if not his best seasons in the reception department. We also have a really small sample of him playing with Deshaun Watson, so we can't really know how that's going to impact his target share, but at least in the 6 games that they did play together, he had the same receptions per game he's had for his career. Like it didn't really change. Again, super small sample, but the only evidence we do have says it's the same as it's always been. Now, one thing some people point to is that it's possible, and honestly, I would say likely, that the Cleveland Browns throw the ball at a higher rate this season. They're expected to be a more pass-heavy team than they've been in the past. I don't really think that's a bad thing for Chubb. He's going to get his carries no matter what the pass-run split is. Like if they were just a super run-heavy team, they would just shift a little bit more workload to Jerome Ford. They're obviously not going to give him like 400 carries, right? Just to be something ridiculous. But if they shift to a very pass-heavy team, well, they'll just stop bringing Chubb off the field. Like they're not going to be like, oh, we're throwing it a ton. Guess we can only get Chubb 10 carries. Like he's still going to get his carries no matter what the split is. If they go pass heavy, he'll just have a higher percentage of the team's carries. So don't worry too much about seeing that they're going to throw the ball a little bit more. Chubb's still going to get his. And I would say that if anything, it opens up that ceiling we talked about before of maybe he can get a little bit more involvement in the receiving game. Overall, Chubb, just a very safe pick. He's been the running back 16, 7, 9, 11, and 5 since joining the league. And it's incredibly likely that he once again finishes in that running back like 5 to 10 range. And I would say that running back 5 to 8 range, a really, really good range, a very likely range for where he's going to finish this season. Right now, my projection is 244 carries for 1,220 yards, along with 32 receptions for 259 more yards and 12.7 total touchdowns. That comes in just under 14 half PPR points per game and is running back 6 overall. So Chubb, clearly a very, very good pick, but so are the other two. So let's break down Tony Pollard next. Pollard will be entering his 5th season in the NFL, having turned 26 this April. People definitely view him as a smaller running back, but I think people think he's like a little bit smaller than he is. He's 6 foot, 210 pounds. He is an inch taller and 8 pounds heavier than Christian McCaffrey. So he's definitely not too small to handle a large workload. People are also going to have this ankle injury in the back of their minds, but Pollard has only missed 4 games in his 4-year career. Now, to be fair, he hasn't been given the workload that we're expecting this season yet, right? Like it's much less impressive to stay healthy when you're averaging 6 or 8 carries per game as opposed to 15 or 16 carries per game, right? But he has increased his touches per game from 6.7 to 8.1 to 11.3 up to 14.5 last season. So last season, he was getting a decent amount of touches per game, stays healthy for most of the season, then getting injured right at the end. And also, unlike Nick Chubb, he's averaging 2.5 receptions per game over the last 2 years. And I know a 1 reception per game increase over Nick Chubb doesn't seem like a lot, but given Pollard's efficiency in the receiving game, that's the equivalent of 3 extra carries per game. And so when you think about the difference between these two, you could really add 3 carries per game to Tony Pollard just in the increase in receptions you're going to see. And if we think about this season, it's possible that, he has the upside to even grow that, to maybe say it's, 4, 5, 6 carries per game difference in receiving. At least as of recording this, Ezekiel Elliott is gone. He will not be on Dallas this season. And if that holds, then Dallas is losing a running back that's had 355, 296, 284, and 248 touches in each of Pollard's 4 seasons. That is a massive workload that needs to be replaced now. And their current backups of Deuce Vaughn, Ronald Jones, they're not going to do that, right? They're not going to get that many touches. And so you can see why people are excited about Pollard this season. If he can handle not even that many, just a small amount of those touches and then remain with what you were doing last season, there's a lot of upside. Now, my hesitancy is when you look at Nick Chubb, I know that any running back that they potentially add in free agency, if they want to add a backup, is not going to hurt Nick Chubb. He's still going to have a very strong role in the offense, the same role at least that he's had in recent seasons. With Pollard, I'm not 100% sure that's the case. He's maxed out at the same number of carries per game that Nick Chubb had as a rookie, basically working as a number 2. And even last season when you had Ezekiel Elliott banged up, Zeke just not looking healthy at all, not looking good or efficient, it didn't matter. Pollard still only hit 20 carries 1 time. So my concern is that the team just doesn't view him as a workhorse, and that sometime this summer they're going to add another running back, whether it's free agency or trade, that they intend to use on early downs, and that's going to hurt him a lot. Because just looking at it right now, it's a very close decision between these 3 running backs. If there's a possibility that they're going to add in a running back that's going to take 150 carries, that's concerning. Because of that, I have to rank Pollard behind Nick Chubb right now. If we find ourselves in August and this backfield looks the same and they're committed to Tony Pollard as the clear number 1 running back, I will absolutely reconsider, and I will very likely rank Pollard first among these 3. I just don't believe that they're going to enter the season with just Pollard, Jones, and Vaughn as their top 3 in some order. We'll see how Jones and Vaughn really shakes up there. And I'm worried that if they add a player, that running back is going to just take too many carries for Pollard to overtake Nick Chubb in fantasy. So right now, my projection is Tony Pollard, 225 carries for 1,123 yards, 38 receptions for 346 yards, and 11.4 total touchdowns. That comes out to just over 13.6 half PPR points per game, and is running back 7 just behind Nick Chubb. So Chubb is 6th, Pollard is 7th. Where does Jacobs rank? Jacobs is entering his 5th season in the NFL, having turned 25 this February. He's coming off a league-leading 1,653 rushing yards. He had over 2,000 total yards. He added 400 yards through the air, and he had 53 receptions. Also, a side note, he's gotten very unlucky with touchdowns in his career, at least in like the receiving game. He has 160 career receptions, has never had a receiving touchdown. The only other running back in the history of the NFL with that many receptions and no receiving touchdowns was Gerald Riggs back in the 80s. So I'm thinking that eventually Jacobs going to score a receiving touchdown, but just an interesting note. He just does not catch touchdown passes. But anyways, the big change this season is what everyone knows, obviously, quarterback play for the Raiders. We don't really know what it's going to look like. Derek Carr is now gone. He's with the Saints. He's been replaced by Jimmy Garoppolo for now, at least if Jimmy G can pass a physical. If he can't, then you're probably looking at Carson Wentz, Teddy Bridgewater, and Nick Foles as the top free agent quarterbacks right now. Or maybe they trade for Winston, or maybe like Brissett or Heineke, really depending on what happens with the Commanders' quarterbacks. I don't really know who the quarterback's going to be this season. Once that shakes out, whoever the quarterback 3 is, maybe the Raiders go after them. And again, you could trade for Winston. That's definitely a possibility. So all of that, not exactly ideal, and it definitely leaves a very wide range of outcomes for how good the Raiders are going to be this season. And I point that out because Jacobs is a very, very game script dependent running back. He has 15 career games with over 100 rushing yards, and 12 of them have come in wins. And if we look back to last season, he had 12.7 half PPR points per game in losses, 26.9 half PPR points per game in wins. He actually had 21.8 more total half PPR points per game in just their 6 wins compared to their 11 losses. That is absolutely wild. Very, very dependent on them winning for fantasy production. And so when a player like that has a lot of uncertainty about how good the team is going to be, and it's mostly uncertainty on the low end with how bad they're going to be, it's not great. And it comes with even more of a concern when you look at their schedule. They have the second hardest schedule this season, just ahead of the Patriots in terms of opponent projected win total. They have a very difficult schedule. And so on average, they're not going to win as many teams as other teams. And then you look at how good they are and you're like, yeah, they're not very likely to win their division. They are probably going to finish 3rd or 4th in their division. And you look at their 6.5 win total, being big time underdogs to have a winning record. It's not looking super likely that the Raiders are going to have a ton of games where they're up late in the game, in the 4th quarter. That's not amazing for a very game script dependent running back like Jacobs. Now, the counter to all of this is, well, they were bad last year, right? And he still crushed it. And I definitely understand, drafting him if you expect just a repeat of last season, that they're not that great of a team, but that they just lean on Adams and Jacobs. Jacobs crushes, and he just basically does what he did last season. I think he was 4th in overall points for running backs. I'm just a little bit concerned that they could be even worse, maybe be like a 4 or a 5 win team, and that would really hurt Jacobs a lot more than someone like Adams. Adams on this team, even if they're losing, can still have those 10 for 170 and 2 touchdown games in losses. But if you historically look at the losses for Jacobs, they're not good games. He crushes in wins and doesn't do very well in losses. And so if there's a concern that they're going to be really bad, just again, depending on their quarterback situation, that's going to hurt him a lot more. And since we just know the Browns, the Cowboys, they're going to be good offenses this season, I would just rather go with them. If they're all really good players, just take the less risky one since everyone has really good upside, and I would rank Jacobs last. So my final projection for Jacobs, 273 carries, a little over 1,200 yards, 41 receptions for another 296 yards, 10.2 total touchdowns. That comes out to 13.4 half PPR points per game. My running back, 8 behind Nick Chubb and Tony Pollard. So again, final rankings, Chubb, then Pollard, then Jacobs. But again, if Dallas does not add another running back this summer, then I will very likely move Pollard to first among these three. So that'll do it for this week's player breakdown. If you have any other players you want me to break down next week, put it in the comment section below. Upvote the responses you agree with. I'll be back tomorrow to go over my favorite running backs this season, Saturday to go over the biggest ADP changes over the last 2 weeks, and then Sunday to talk about some optimal draft strategies this season. That, my friends, is in this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? How about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.